Mhm.
Okay, so good evening, everyone, and good morning. I know we are in different time zones. So Karen is from Canada, I'm in Dubai, and I just want to welcome everybody again to Talk to Connect. It's always a pleasure to have amazing people on my platform who are here to share, to empower, to inspire, to let us learn. The purpose of Talk to Connect, as usual, is to always help you find your own story, find your own journey. And today we are having an amazing guest. I met her on Facebook. She's doing an amazing job on Facebook. She's an inspiration to me. I always follow what she's teaching on Facebook as a coach and a businesswoman. I'm learning a lot from her. And I saw a story on Facebook that really inspired me. And I reached out to her and I asked her to come and share the story. It has a lot of, it incited me a lot in different ways. Karen is doing a lot of things, and I really am inspired with what she's doing. She's going to share with us all the amazing things that she's doing, the journey that took her there, and she's going to share with us her story. So, Karen, I want to welcome you and I want to thank you so much for taking your time.
Well, thank you so much, Fatima, for having me on. And it's kind of funny that the one piece that I wrote about was actually about my partner, which is what had inspired you to ask me to come on. And so I had to kind of get permission from her because it's
Yeah.
her story, it's our story, but a lot is it's her story. And just to talk a little bit about what it was is there's a bit of a miracle that happened in the last couple of months where my partner Sue had been blind for 7 years, legally declared so. She learned how to do Braille. She taught other people how to do Braille and things like that. And she lived as a blind person. I always, we went traveling at one point and it was very funny because I was very afraid to take her anywhere that I might break her. And, you're more responsible and things. So I had seen that there was traveling that was allowed by this blind group, and they were going down to Mexico, and they were going in the cenotes and things like that, and the price was astronomical. It was like really expensive. So I thought, well, if they can do it, why can't I take her? So we're trying to figure out how to navigate the airport, and the first time through, I lost her. I actually forgot about her. She was sitting in the car, and I grabbed the luggage and I started to walk away when the what do you call him? The fellow who drove us to the airport. He said, "Excuse me, ma'am, aren't you forgetting something?" She's still sitting in the seat. I was like, "Oh, geez." So at that point, we put a tie between us, which later became a dog leash. And she would joke as we go through airports, my seeing eye dog, which was me, but it was a way to keep her connected to me and to make sure nobody came between us. But the story that's evolved from that after 7 years is that she's miraculously in the last couple of months got her eyesight back. There was a drug that they gave her. They just assumed that it was one thing when in fact it was something else, and so that's changed our lives. So that's one of the inspirational things that I was talking about, was how she'd gone from being blind to now being sighted. Unfortunately, she's not used to balance and walking, so she's been breaking a lot of bones. So that's a bit of my story, which brought you to me. What I do is I nowadays I'm a coach, and where before I came from being a postal worker, which I found very unsatisfactory. So I went into counseling, mostly youth counseling with youth and their families. That also included day programs, treatment. So a lot of them were for various different reasons and had difficulties. There were teenagers into their early 20s. Then I became a first responder, which was it's a police officer. And I've been doing that for about 15 years. And last year, I was kind of sidelined, taken out of the 911 role because of an illness, diabetes. I couldn't be on the road. And so I really missed connecting with people. That was a huge thing. And being a part of the journey, I mean, I've spent 35 years in my professions helping people and helping them get through some of the worst times. So that's when I decided to start coaching and started to write about people's experiences, my own clients, that type of stuff.
Okay, thank you so much. I mean, hey, you have a lot of experience, and that's amazing. So I want to relate back to the story because when I was reading the story, you just summarized it. But there was what I learned from your partner's story is that she had this, like a lot of us give up when we have um, things happening to us. a lot of people give up and start having this despair. Okay, I've lost my leg, I've become blind. But what I read in the story, and that's what inspired me to want you to share the story, is that she never gave up on herself. It was like she inspired you kind of to keep on moving, to doing what you want. So how,
You
yeah, okay.
you know, one of my biggest heroes is my partner. I've watched her go through things and not give up on herself, and it's taught me so much. So if I even backtrack and go before that, she had a stroke, and the stroke was not totally significant where she was totally disabled, but enough that they sent her home. And unfortunately, she lost a lot of cognitive ability at the time. And one of those things was her short-term memory. So they told us that she would never be able to learn anything again. Anything that was in her long term, absolutely, but not in her short term. So I remember, and she was at that point where she knew what she'd lost. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of the book Call Me Charlie or Flowers for Algernon, where he becomes artificially intelligent. He was not that intelligent before they gave him intelligence, and then he starts to lose it, and he recognizes that he's losing it. It's very depressing, very sad. And that was Sue's thing. She really recognized what she had lost, and she didn't like who she was. So she decided that no, it wasn't going to hold her down. She had me go, and we started with kindergarten books, learning how to print your name, learning how to control her hand again, all sorts of things. What's 1 + 1, this type of stuff. And she progressed up to grade 6, once you get off the shelves, and then she said, okay, I want to learn Braille. Now, again, this would be a new thing for her. At the time, she had her sight, but she was scared she might lose it because she's got diabetes and there was complications. And so I remember her sitting there for 8 hours in a day. I go to work and I come home, A, the next day, A, B, B, B. And she just kept going. And she kept doing it every day until it became from short-term to long-term memory. And they told her she'd never learn anything again. Not only did she learn it, she taught it. So then she started teaching other people. And, it was amazing to watch her perseverance, her not giving up. And so I've seen her reinvent herself, because up to then she'd been an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And that was her whole identity. And it was lost in a moment. The art, the ability to manage her arm, because that's one of the places that it hit. She no longer had the fine motor skills. I will tell you, the one thing that hasn't come back is math. So it's always interesting when we go places, I'll turn to her and people want to know, they can't tell that she's had a stroke now. She has progressed so much. That's the beauty of the mind, of how it can repair itself. And I'll turn to her and say, 8 + 12. All right. And go, because she can't do math. But other than that, people wouldn't know that she's had a stroke. She's worked so hard to be able to bring herself forward. So, there was that where she redefined herself as an artist. Then she became the person who taught herself Braille and then taught it. Then she lost her eyesight. And I remember her not giving up with that. I think what really helped her, a lot of people, when they become blind, they just sit on a couch and become very depressed. She had a best friend who was around the corner who'd been blind since birth. So her experience of being blind was very different. And she just took her under her wing and showed her that it doesn't mean that you can't do, And so when I said, let's go to Mexico, like we were travelers, we've always kind of traveled. It's like, I'll take you to Mexico. I mean, I was terrified. I'm sure she was terrified. Thank God our first experience was fabulous. God was on our side. Everything went well. People looked after us. Not so much as years went on, but at that time we needed it for our own confidence. So she's taught me resilience. She's taught me how to redefine myself. She's one of my best supporters and rah type of person. And I have to say, and I always say this, that my own tribulations led me to be able to be there for her in a way that she needed. And what I mean by that is I have a history of alcoholism and drug addiction, and I recovered from these in my early 20s. But for most of my life, what we call is the root of alcoholism is what they say is, selfishness and self-centeredness. And I am the epitome of that. It's all about me, don't you know? Um, but I had been through recovery for so many years that when she had the stroke, I was at a point where I was able to put myself and my needs on the back burner and to be there for her, to nurture her, to look after her. And, if it had even been 10 or 15 years before that, I don't know that I could have been. I had prepared myself. I felt like my whole year in preparation for that moment, of when I needed to be there for somebody else. And for most mothers, you're probably all going, are you crazy? Like, that's what we do every day for our kids. I'm not a mother. I don't have those maternal instincts, like it was always just about me. And so for you guys, mothers, it's probably, well, that's natural when you're looking after your children. I never experienced that. So I had to get out of my own way. And I think a lot of her ability to shift, move, and things like that was because it was highly supportive of me. Like, I was highly supportive of her. I like to take that credit.
That is so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. The reason why I wanted you to share this part is because there are people who are going through life in different challenges. And I think that when you talk about resilience and when you talk about believing in that you can, it's possible for you to get back to do what you want. It's so difficult. So having understanding this story, you as a coach, and I know you're doing a lot of things to help people change their mind. What would you tell someone? What are kind of the things that you can advise someone who's feeling he's giving up on life? Because I know a lot of us are going, like you said, drug addiction. We have women who've gone through abuse. We have people who don't have hope in life. So what are the things that you can say, build this resilience in someone so that you can come back and start building your own story? I think most of us live in the past and forget that we can take the past and learn and start growing.
Well, one of the things I've been contemplating, my internet is a little unstable in Canada. We've had a lot of problems the last couple of days. A major network went out, so I'm not getting the message anymore, but I hope it stays. I may turn off the camera just for a minute to save it and then come back if that's okay with you. Like, I'll still be here talking, but just in case. Yeah, one of our major networks completely down. So with that, what I would say, resilience is, there's this concept of people live in the past, they live in the future, but do we really? The only moment that we have right now is the present. We don't really live in the future. We really don't live in the past. And so with what's
Hello.
back.
Okay.
I think can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Sorry about that. I think
No
I think
problem.
they're still trying to fix it, so they keep glitching. So, the idea that we only have the present moment, and that's one of the things that I was taught. Okay, I'm gonna turn off my
Camera.
my video.
Okay.
I was taught that you only have this moment. This moment. I can get through anything in this moment. I can prolong it to later. So, when you talk about the resilience, I think some of the really important.
Uh-oh.
I'm actually going to come in through my cell phone. It might be a little bit better.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that. Like I said, we've had problems since Friday.
No problem.
So what usually happens with people with resilience is that, you have to have a support network. It's very hard, I think, to go through these types of things without having that.
Mhm.
I think it's very important. So because of that, some people are alone. Something happens and they're alone. So, it doesn't have to be necessarily, okay, so I'm going to join in here. If you could let me back into the room.
Okay, just a minute. There.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I think this will probably work better. I'm going to close down the other
Okay.
because then it's streaming from my phone, the cell phone.
Okay.
So I think that, people think about having a partner as their support or about having a family member, but it doesn't always have to be that way. Like I've gotten support from like a running group, for example, when Sue had her stroke, they came to the door with like tons of food for us. That was a running group. Your church group, I've had them come forward before our own church group and help us when we've needed help. Sue needed some guidance around learning TTC and how to manage our area, and they helped. So I think there are other ways that we can look for support. Faith. I think faith is a huge thing. And, it doesn't have to be the God faith of a religion. It can be faith in the universe and the goddess. It can be faith in other people that have been able to go through that. There's a saying that I've learned, which is act as if. And the other is, basically, if it can be for somebody else, it can be for me. Having that belief. So rather than sit at home and watch, depressing movies and things like that, go towards what, you become what you feed yourself. So whatever it is, when I say feed, I'm talking specifically about your thoughts. So if you're out there and you're looking at negative things and things like that, it's like that's just going to make you more depressed and make you feel more disempowered. Instead, if you look for inspirational stories, like I will tell you that my Facebook feed is full, and I'm sure yours is, of inspirational stories, that type of thing. So I think that it's important that what you feed your mind is extremely, for Pete's sakes. Now my dog's going to make noise because he wants out. They're always on the wrong side of the door. Get. Okay. So, and a faith and belief in something greater than yourselves. I think one of the things is Sue always had a feeling of a purpose, a greater purpose that she was meant for. We have a saying in our family, that's her and I, which is, it is what it is. And we kind of live by that, which is accepting life on life's terms. I think that's a very important piece. So, connecting to a purpose, whether you believe that it's God driven, whether it's fate, universe, just the pining of your heart, whatever it is, having a belief that you are doing something for a greater good. And it doesn't have to be like Catherine the Great, greater good, or be the president of that. It can be the small little things that happen every day, that you impact somebody. Like I impact people with my stories, like you can impact it just by smiling at somebody. I have a group that I belong to. When they go out for dinner as a group, they all put in a lot of money extra as tips. It's known that we do that. So you do that, you put in, and they give it to a waitress. We're talking $15,000. They change somebody's life. Things like that. A stranger, they don't know. So, there's lots of little ways that we can do that. And I think that that's important, and connecting to that purpose and knowing that you're making a difference. For Sue, learning to do Braille was a piece of her wanting to teach it to others because she wanted to learn it because she was scared she was going to go blind. And she wanted to be prepared for that. And once she got it, it was like, okay, now what's my purpose? Let me teach others. And then she actually became the spokesperson for what we call the CNIB here, Canadian National Institute for the Blind, in making our area considered the most accessible in all of Canada. And, so she did that, and that gave her greater purpose. She just recently had, she also did artwork around Toronto for the blind, which would include a picture, but also had textured stuff. We have one in our neighborhood. Again, becoming a greater good. She looked for ways to transcribe for the sighted person what the world was like for blind people. Mm-hmm. And that became her purpose at that time. And in fact, a small little thing is she just had a piece of artwork put on it's street art is what it is. We're beautifying street things. So it's a concrete barrier, but it was for blind people. And we submitted it while she was still blind. And I looked at her and said, should we be telling them that you're not blind anymore and they have to take it down because of that miracle? So I think those, excuse me, are definitely the components that help to building resiliency and not giving up on yourself. Wallowing in self-pity does not help. Whether it's because you've lost your leg, you can't walk, or you're dealing with an addiction, it just gets worse. And yeah, it's not a good place.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think what you've shared is amazing. Like the fact that, when we go through things, we always look of how can I change myself? But when you focus on how can I help others, helping myself, changing to become the better version of myself is so powerful. I like the fact that she was always thinking of how can I improve others, to help others to have a better access or a better to be in a better situation in where she was, rather than feeling sorry about yourself. I think what you said, if you sit and feel sorry for yourself, you don't help anyone. So talking about that, and I think it's easy to say you need to believe in yourself. For me, one of the difficult things I've faced in my life is just believing in who I was. It took my whole life, I can say that. Just believing that I am capable of doing something. I am good enough to try something. I have the capability. So how would you, because I think when you talk about our thoughts, it starts from a very young age, or maybe start from the things that are defining our lives as we grow, or as we change our lives. So how do you actually, when we talk about thoughts and beliefs, what are some of the things that you can tell people that can help them build that belief system? Because for me, I can say it took a lot of time for me to even say, I'm good enough. I can sit and make a conversation or have a conversation with Karen and believe that I'm capable of doing that.
There's a saying that you can't be 10 years sober till you're 10 years sober. Yes. And it's kind of like when you say it takes a long time. I've been 35 years clean and sober working on myself, and I can tell you, and I work with a lot of alcoholics. I work with a lot of clients, and this may be true with men, but I've worked most of my life, well, except as a police officer, but in a kind of intimate sharing of ideas with women. And the big thing I find is we have a little gremlin on our shoulder. You're no good. You can't do it. Blah, blah, blah. That self-esteem stuff. And I think that that's what kills us. And it's about how much we're aware of that. When we're not aware of it, we kind of go through life not understanding why we may sabotage ourselves, relationships don't go well, this type of stuff. So I think the first step is to realize, I think they say, I wrote about it one time, it was something like 78,000 thoughts in a moment or in a day that generally most people have. And as women, I find 90% of them are negative. So the first step is just becoming aware of how we talk to ourselves, our self-talk. I have found that I think a lot of my recovery has to do with first getting in touch with it, understanding it, understanding how devastating it was. I would not stand in a room for 2 minutes with somebody who talks to me the way that I used to talk to myself, And then the next thing is understanding what you need to do in order to change that. So once you become aware, and one of the things I teach clients, once you become aware, you now have to take responsibility for those thoughts and do something different. So you can't just let them rattle around in there, because that just it reinforces your thoughts, your beliefs, your ideas. You have to be able to counteract them because it goes into your subconscious. I think of our subconscious as I don't know if you have them, but libraries with the card index thing. And, that's the way I kind of think of my subconscious. And I've heard others describe it that way. And if you have a thought, it files it into there. And, you may not really realize it, but it's impactful because when I go under and look at self, it's all this negative crap that's in there. So you have to counteract it. So I'll do things like, oh, you're just being silly, Karen. Well, no, if I say something like that, or, oh, you're an idiot, I have to counteract it. And I'm going to do that right now by saying, no, you're not. You're just fearful right now. Or, absolutely you're not. That's not true. So you have to counteract it so that your subconscious gets a different message. It's kind of like, and if somebody else is doing it to you, that's considered abuse, and you should really think about whether you want to be in that relationship. But if somebody's calling you, hey, stupid, idiot, this type of stuff, as children, we couldn't do anything about it, but as adults, we can. We can put up our hand and say, hello, that's inappropriate, not okay, and that's not true, and I'm not accepting it. And say to myself, that's not true about myself. I believe differently. It's so important to reprogram that. It's all to do with how we learn habits as well, and neuroplasticity, which is basically I always think of it as a pathway, that I start walking along. And this is what I learned when Sue was able to teach herself Braille, when they said that her short-term memory, it was like the line between what she could do in her memory, there was a block there, a big, huge concrete wall, and she couldn't go over it. So instead, what she started to do was go around it. And the first time she went around it, it was just a very shallow path that she could step off at any point. If she forgot it, she didn't go back to it the next day. So if you think of it, even habits are that way. Okay. So we do know the brain can actually rejuvenate itself. So, she keeps walking around and keeps walking around and keeps walking around until eventually that path becomes a bit of a ditch. And then you keep walking around until it becomes, a canyon. And now there's no way of getting out of it. You've now got a new neural pathway and new habit and new thought process. But that takes time. Like I go back to, you can't be 10 years sober without having 10 years sober.
True. That is very true. Thank you so much. I think for me, I'll really agree with that, because for you to just break that voice of that telling you you're not good enough, it takes a lot of time for you to just accept who you are. Just accepting who you are as a person, it really, really, really takes a long time. And it's a process. As Karen said, it's a process. You just have to keep on trying, keep on doing, and keep on working on it until you get to the level where you can believe in yourself. So you talked about habits. And I think a lot of people have a lot of habits. And I'm gonna, since you said you've worked with youth, so let's talk about youth. And I think one of the habits that the youth have, and most of them tend to have this habit that lead them to actually mess their lives, is having peer group. And even us as grown up, we have this habit of wanting to have people around us and start living according to what people expect us to be. I think that's the hardest thing that people have, to just choose a path and say, I'm going to be Fatma and I'm going to have the right people with me. Otherwise, I don't have to live according to what society is. So what habits would you say helped you to break that pattern of, okay, I'm living with people who, I was an alcoholic and I'm meeting with alcoholic people, but I'm creating my own habits so that I can help them, I can change. And what advice would you give to youth about peer group? Because I think most of the youth suffer with peer group more than anything else, and they end up messing a lot in life.
Yeah, that's a big one. It's almost developmental. You're asking, how can we change our peer group, or how can we make it different for them? But it's kind of like you have to crawl before you walk. To me, it's a little bit developmental. It's that state of, I'm really immature still, although I have an adult body, and what my ideas and conceptions are very different. So for example, a 7-year-old doesn't understand the behavior today is going to impact them next year. A 14-year-old has a little bit more of a conception of that, although a lot of them still feel invincible and don't really understand what they're adult. So, when you say, like, what would I say to youth? I don't actually speak to the youth about that anymore. Instead, I speak to the parent and say, just they're 18, hang on for dear life till they're 18, because they will come back between 18 and 21. And as long as they didn't make any mistakes that, they killed somebody and end up in jail that they can't reverse, they will come back. It's that maturity and getting through. So, there is some of that developmental. What can parents do? And I'll give you an example. However, exposure is a huge piece of it. And an example is when I worked at the group home, we had a lot of kids that had been in group homes, childcare, things like that, and their experience is very different. But then when we take the kids that were coming straight out of a home, they'd never been exposed to a lot of stuff. Now, all of a sudden, it was parent-teen conflict, but the parents put them in. And after a couple of years, I started to realize it wasn't necessarily in the best interest of the kids, because now they're exposed to stuff that they weren't exposed to before. For example, they may not have had siblings. Now all of a sudden they're living with kids that are stealing, maybe they're being over sexualized, all sorts of stuff. And now they're exposed to that. So the original problem that parents may have put them in the house for, which was not cleaning up after themselves, fighting, being violent with the parents. Now all of a sudden the kid may be selling drugs at school, all sorts of stuff. And it's about exposure. I mean, the statistics out there suggest that, who we are and what we do, what we read, what we take in, all of that impacts who we are. And the fact is, we may not see it now, but it's in 5 years' time. It's like what I do today is going to impact me in 5 years' time. Mm-hmm. If I'm out of shape and out of, overweight, all that type of stuff, it didn't happen yesterday. It happened 5 years. It started 5 years ago. So with the peer group, it's like taking a look. We get a lot of missing person calls. Teenagers in Canada, where I work with the police. And when I go and I ask the mom or the dad, so who do they hang with? I don't know. What's the password on their phone? I don't know. They don't tell me, but they're living under your roof. Yeah, but they won't tell me. Okay, who pays for that phone? Well, I do. Then why do they still have it if they won't tell you? What were they, here's this, what were they wearing this morning when they left? Mm-hmm. They don't, and I we're not cynical, try not to be cynical, but there is a whole thing about what I call an absentee parent. You're there, but you're not really. So what usually happens? Sorry, what was that?
No, I was listening. I didn't say anything. Maybe it's the internet.
Oh, yes. Sorry. So, I remember when I was young, a personal story. I was in my teens. I was going through a lot of bad stuff anyway, and I was drinking and drugging. And so I was violent in my family. And I remember my mom trying to help me with homework, not help me, go to school. And I wasn't. And eventually she backed right out. She just gave up with me with school. She withdrew. And I never forgot that, because even though she did that and it was a response to me, it hurt me and it bothered me, and now in the end, my mother and I made up, we got back together, things like that many years later. But she did give up. She walked away emotionally. She walked away. And I say to parents, don't stay involved. The biggest thing that I see that makes a difference in families, and this is a very small thing, but it's dinner time together. No electronics. Put them away. So. Are we still here?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, sorry. So I'm done. I know there was a second part to the question, but I don't remember what it was. I talked too long.
So I was asking, how do we, because it's not only youth who are affected by other people. So for grown-ups, it's the expectation of what people think of me. What if I do, and what society thinks of me? How will my friends think if I decide to do this and this? And I think as especially as women, we have a lot of this, that we end up not even doing what we want, because there's a lot of what society expect of us rather than what we expect of ourselves. So how would you advise someone on how to break this? Because I think one of the things people talk about, they say about self-love, you need to love yourself more. But there is societies or communities where there's so much expectation on women on certain ways that they should be or behave or how to associate with others, that they find it hard to break from this society expectation and being the individual that they want to be and do the things that they want to do.
You know, that's up until now, that's made up a huge chunk of my clientele. It's the women that are kind of like in their 40s or 50s where, you know, they may have started a career but gave it up for the family. You know, they've been on the side burner for the husband, supporting him, raising the kids, and now all of a sudden they're hitting a time when they're facing the empty nest. Their kids don't need them anymore, but it may be that some of their kids, they now have grandkids and their kids need them to babysit their kids. Mm-hmm. Or their parents, and usually not or, and their parents are aging and now all of a sudden they have to start looking after them. And what I'm finding is that age group is all of a sudden going, hold on, what about me? Like my whole life has been in service to other people, putting my needs on the back burner. And so I think that that's a real problem in the fact that, well, it's not a problem. That's when we can start experiencing freedom. Mm-hmm. You know, that's when a lot of people pick up, DM me and say, Karen, I want to start looking at myself. And so the first thing is that I find for women especially is becoming clear, clear about what my expectations are, clear about who I want to be, clear about what my spirituality is, what are my values, because I find that we go through life living for everybody else, that we don't stop to ask, well, what are they truly for me, So that's the first thing, is getting clear. And that includes like a faith, a God, a purpose, a mission. It doesn't have to be for a business mission. We can all have personal missions. I know a friend whose whole mission is about having joy and kindness in her life, and that's not her job. That's just, it's a wonderful way of being. So the first is having that clarity. The second is then once we have the clarity, we have to give ourselves permission, and that permission is about permission to, if it's schooling, to put money into schooling, it's to change careers, it's to say no, it's to stop people pleasing, it's about being honest in our relationships, which means being authentically myself. It means learning that it's not conflict and confrontation, express ourselves and how to do that productively. The next step would then be confidence. How do you go from being somebody who served everybody else, to then getting clear, you get clear about it, give yourself permission. Now I have to practice it. Now I have to have the confidence to go out there and try new things, and then the last is the freedom that comes from that. The freedom from not having any regrets for your decisions or the differences that you're making in your life, putting other people, not second, but putting yourself first. Those things are what I call 4 pillars to a system that I've developed called Maximum Happiness. And, you can go on any of these pillars and kind of look at where you are. People use the life wheel, and by determining, what areas you would like to work on and that are like 4s or 5s, you can go through this process. The unfortunate thing is we don't learn this at 5, at 10, at 15, at 20, We are still very much socialized to be the caretakers. We still are very socialized to put ourselves second. So the only way that we can do that is to emulate that and show it as mothers to our children, to our girl children as they're growing up. Be that example for them, show them. So, the sooner you start, the better for them.
That is true.
I hope that.
Yeah, it's really powerful. And I think a lot of people, when you talk about the understanding the areas of your life, I think a lot of people, me included, until when I started going on my journey of self-discovery, I never knew that the other areas of my life really affect how I perform my work and how I do. So it was like, I want to make money, I want to get my career, and I want to do better. But then other things around me were not working. So when you talk about, am I really, how am I connected?
Are we still here?
Yes, yes, you can hear me or no?
Yes, yes, I can hear.
Hello? Hello?
I think that actually was me saying that to you quite a while back.
Okay. I don't know. The internet is really, I don't know if mine also is acting. Can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay. So as I was saying, for me, what you said is really powerful, because when I started learning about the other areas of my life, understanding that there is more areas that affect me in how I perform in my work and in my business and everything, it just changed everything. Because I think a lot of people concentrate on two things: how am I going to make finance and my career, and we forget that our relationship with our children, with our spouse, our friends and family really play a big role in what we are doing, my spirituality. So that's so true. But you talked about values, and this for me was a big change in my life, because when we grow up, there's some things that are being installed in us, and as I grew up, I was like, one of my fundamental value was family, because that's what I was raised to believe, like family is important. And I'm not saying it's not important, but when I started going out and finding myself, I realized one thing that I value more than anything else is freedom of being who I want to be, freedom of doing things and being creative and enjoying life. So for me, freedom changed everything. When I allowed myself to be free to be who I really wanted, it changed a lot of things in my life. So what would you tell people? Because it was a strange thing when people were talking about values. For me, it was like, what do you mean values? Like, what are the values? Because there's some things that are installed in you. Your family comes first and school comes first. But how do you help someone to understand how important is their values? Because even your values in your relationship play a big role. When you understand your values and your partner's values, it really changes the way you communicate and do things around you.
You know, I think one of the first things is understanding that values aren't inherent. You get to choose them.
Yes.
You know, so for example, when I first went to AA, I was classified as a thief. You know, well, if I want to be seen, or a liar, you know, because I used to phone at work and lie and things. And it's like, you know what, if you want to be, I was told, if I want to be considered an honorable person, I must do honorable acts.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little easy for me to take a look at all the negatives and kind of decide that I didn't want to do them. But what do you replace that with? That's a little bit of the difference. And the thing is that you can choose your values. You know, if you value loyalty, then be loyal.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to have a friend, then be a friend. You know, so, but some people just think that values are kind of like living their life. They don't think about it. They rationalize and justify, for example, unethical behavior. The biggest thing nowadays that I see is, and I'll say it as an author, is, you know, there's always a deflection. She made me, he made me, because of this, because of that, to the government. And, you know, self-autonomy, self-rule only comes from taking yourself and your accountability. So the values will govern who we become. They govern who we are. They govern who we hang with, what jobs we do, all of that. So, you know, if you want to elevate yourself, make more money, for example, then you have to look at your values. Well, you know, drug dealers, I don't know how much they make, but I'm sure they make lots. But, you know, that's not the idea. You don't want to become a drug dealer to make money, but instead you want to take a look at what value can I bring to others. So maybe it's service first. There's a good value for business. Or maybe it's going above and beyond. There's another, you know, you'll stand under, because it does mandate and dictate the choices and decisions that you make and where you end up.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Thank you so much. So you talked about confidence, and this is a word that people just throw around, and you know, you have to build confidence. And what does confidence mean to you? Because I think confidence means different to a lot of it, to everybody. So what does, because sometimes people use words and like, when you get confidence is everything, confidence is what gives you this. I hear that a lot, but I think everybody defines confidence in a different way and it works differently to different people. So what does confidence mean to you?
I think confidence means, for me, I think of the phrase, do it scared.
Mm-hmm.
It allows me the ability, based on faith, that no matter what, I'm going to be okay. Just do it. That was my slogan for a long time. It was Nike's, it was mine. No, just do it. I just say that. And so to me, that's what confidence is just the willingness to try it without knowing, without knowing the outcome. So is it faith? Mm-hmm. It's because of my faith that it allows me to have that confidence in myself.
I don't know what's happening. I think your internet keeps on switching off and okay.
Oh, I was thinking that it may be lagging.
Yeah, so it keeps on repeating what you're saying. Okay, we are good now. Okay.
Yeah. It's a bit of a lag, I think, but I'm not having any problems here since I switched to the cell phone.
Okay. I think we're okay now.
Okay.
Okay, so that's powerful. I think what you said, I believe in that a lot. Having faith, doing without having fear. I think a lot of us are scared of the unknown. You don't know what's the outcome, but when you allow yourself to take a risk and do something that you don't know the outcome, but you're trying to do it and just have that faith it's going to work, that for me is confidence. And I really agree with you. So what is the one thing you would say that has driven you so far and has given you the power to keep on growing and keep on building yourself? The one thing that is driving you and has been driving you until now?
That's a big, well, sobriety. I'll say sobriety, right? So that would probably be the first and foremost thing for me every day, is making sure I stay sober. But that's an easy for me nowadays. So I think when you were talking, what I was thinking of was service to others. My whole life feels like it's about service, my purpose. But in that, I also say keeping one step ahead of you. So, for example, when I work with sponsees and that, if I'm telling them they need to do this and do that, so I say sponsees, meaning the sobriety, you need to do step one, or you need to read the big book. Well, I need to be doing that too, or else I'm a hypocrite. When I'm working with a client and I'm helping them through something, I also have ahas. I see things from a different perspective. It challenges me times too. I join groups that make me think more, that aspire more. There's no ceiling. I thought there was a ceiling on spirit, not on spirituality, but on eliteness or on higher thinking. If there is, I haven't met it yet. So I would say that that's the biggest thing that drives me, is a service to others and just staying a step ahead of the client, the sponsee, the whomever it is that I'm talking about or talking with, not about.
That's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. And I think when you say service to others, I think if you like serving others, there's a way you end up finding yourself. And I'm always telling people, the moment you serve others and you're honest and you're authentic about it and you learn, because it's not about right or wrong, it's about getting insights from the people that you're working with or the people you're talking with. And those insights also somehow they change you in a higher level, and you just find yourself growing and becoming a better person. That's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. So I normally like to ask one advice that you can give to a person who feels life is miserable. I'm done. I can't change my life. This is, what advice would you give to that person?
Find your home. And what I mean by that, whether it's a person, a group, a sport, a hobby, doesn't matter, but something that connects you to the earth and to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And it may not be readily apparent and in front of you right now. You have to search it out.
Yes.
You know, people can do puzzles in their own home and find community in that when they go online and share puzzles or things like that. There is something out there where you will feel at home and belong. You just might have to search longer.
So true. That is so powerful. I think when you allow yourself to find that home, you always find peace, because you got to without
knowing the outcome.
Yes, that is so powerful. When you
always
find
peace,
because I don't know why it's doing this. And it's frozen. Can you hear me?
It's going to be interesting what it looks like.
Can you hear me? I think that my internet also is starting to.
That's from a while back.
Yeah. Okay. So I think. So one more question before we end the conversation. In one sentence, how can you describe Karen?
In one sentence.
Yes.
I think I'm complex. I'm not.
That's confusing. You think you're complex and you're not.
Yeah.
Okay, that's nice. So Karen, I know your work, and I've seen so much what you do, and you really inspire me. I always follow your work in your videos, and it inspires me to grow as a coach, as a person. And there's so many things I'm learning, but I'm sure there's a lot of people who we are talking to today don't know what you do. So if you just give a little bit of what you do and how can people reach you in case someone is listening and is inspired and want to talk to you.
Thank you. I'm Karen Vale on Facebook. I do coaching one-to-one mostly. I also do some small groups. I consider myself a life strategist, which basically is a nice way to set coach. I work with all sorts of people, mostly business people though, and entrepreneurs. However, I can be reached on Facebook, as well as I have a webpage, and it's at Karen's Coaching Corner, and corners with a K. So that's KCK. I keep doing that. Karen'sCoachingCorner.com. But just DM me. Yeah. Thank you very much. And I was so pleased to be on here. Thank you so much for asking me, Fatima.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank anyone who has joined us today. Amina Mohammed say, powerful, it's what it is. I want to thank you, everybody, for joining us. Karen, you've given us a lot of insights. I've learned a lot from you today myself. So I want to thank you so much. And I believe there's so many things we can still learn from you as a coach, and hoping that as we go, we'll have you again for another topic, a different topic, where we can always inspire people to grow. Thank you for taking your time, and everybody else, thank you so much for being here. Bye.